everybody. It's time for Screen Time with Gary and Drew, movie streaming and everything in between. A couple of hot topics today. We're going to do the menu, which Drew found very unappetizing, and also the Banshees of Inisherin, which is getting a lot of play during the award season, and Drew and I disagree on that. So first of all, let's get to the menu, Drew. You really did not like this film.
No, and I'll start out by saying I like Ralph Fiennes, he's a great actor, and Anya Taylor-Joy, who was in Queen's Gambit, and in what else was she in? Oh, Peaky Blinders, which I love. And so the actors weren't the problem. This is one of those movies where the writers and the director decide to make a social commentary, social satire. Like, what the hell is the genre? Let's start there. All you got to do is see the preview and well, wait a minute, what is this? And, genre is all about tone, right? What's your tone? What's this about? They describe it as a comedy horror film, which I don't think those two go together very well. And they certainly didn't here, in my opinion. Worse yet, Ralph Fiennes, who's wonderful, gets nominated for a Golden Globe, Best Actor in a Musical or Comedy. It is certainly not a musical, and I'll say, to me, it wasn't a comedy because I don't think I laughed once. And listen, there's some talented people behind it. Seth Reese is one of the writers. He wrote for Late Night with Seth Meyers and The Onion, and Will Tracy, also the writer. He was the original story came from him because when he was on his honeymoon, he went to a dinner on an island, and he worked for The Onion. He wrote for Succession, and then the director, Mark Mylod, was a director for Succession, which I've never watched, Game of Thrones, which I loved, Shameless, which I liked for the first few seasons. They got nominated for Best Original Screenplay. I don't get it. I don't get all the adulation. I don't know what the tone is. I didn't know what the tone is. It's clearly implausible. It makes no sense.
Why don't you set it up?
It's my theory in Hollywood that sometimes people think different means better.
Agreed.
And I love different.
Agreed. But
different doesn't mean better.
No.
Different can be awful. And I'm not going to say this is awful, but I sure as hell was glad it was over when it was over.
Spoiler alert, everybody. Why don't you set up the premise? Because I think you need to explain the premise so people understand why you think it's so ridiculous.
Let me read the log line from, I don't know, IMDb, whatever it was. A young couple travels to a remote island to eat at an exclusive restaurant where the chef has prepared a lavish menu with some shocking surprises. Now that sounds like a comedy. First of all, the young couple, Anya Taylor-Joy is one of them. There's another guy who's an up-and-coming actor. But it's not about just those two. It's about everybody there. The guy starts killing everybody at the restaurant. Okay? Spoiler alert, he just starts killing people left and right. And there's a reason he doesn't like them. He blames them for him losing his passion and for exploiting him if they're like the investor. And it's like, And you could say, I brought up the whole thing about social commentary and some sort of satire because, there's a lot of foodies out there today and they're snobby about food. And this is like, oh, look, here's a snobby guy and he's killing everybody. And it's like, yeah, okay. Not for me.
Did he invite the people to the island first? But were they all invited for a reason?
Yes. Okay. His reason. It's exclusive to go there. It's right. To invite is a big deal. The other part of the couple with Anya Taylor-Joy is, a food snob and, people are getting killed and he's still enjoying the food. It's stupid. I'm sorry. It's just stupid. So
but the chef feels that the people that he's invited are the reason that he's had his downfall
including his own mother.
Oh, you buried the lead, son.
And it's not just him. He's got these sous chefs. There's an army of them. I don't know. There must be 10. And they're all in on it. It's one thing if one guy goes crazy. People go crazy. A guy could be there alone cooking the meal and he poisons people or he kills people. Okay, that's interesting. You got 10 people helping you. Why? And again, social commentary, satire, they so desperately want to be chefs. Compare this chef thing to The Bear. You can't compare
Yeah,
in terms
yeah.
of quality. You forget it. It's
No.
I'm sorry, and I don't want to insult the writers. They're good writers, but this wasn't for me.
Well, I watched the trailer, and a trailer has to be pretty bad for me not to want to watch the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
The whole
got.
point is to get you to watch it.
I was like, I have no interest in this. And Drew and I were talking about it. I said, you know what? I don't want to watch it. I'm going to let Drew, and I'm going to tell people that I just had no desire to watch it, because there are too many other good things that I want to spend time watching. Now,
Well, and here's the temptation now is that if you're streaming, if you got Netflix, well, what the hell? I'll throw it on. Come on, honey, let's watch this. My wife wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes in this movie.
Right.
And look, there's an audience for it. Clearly, there are people who like it. Best original screenplay, please. I'm sorry.
Well,
no offense, guys. You guys a lot more successful than I ever was. But I'm sorry.
Well, I can't. First of all, I can't believe you never watched Succession, which we have to talk about that. I mean, you have to watch Succession.
I watched like the first 2 episodes, I think.
And you didn't buy. Well, that's another story. We'll have to do that for another time. But
yeah,
I mean, this could be this for Succession. This should be the final season, because
by the way, the Boston Globe reviewer did not like The Menu.
Good for him.
I believe if I have it correctly.
Well,
I might be thinking of
here's the problem.
Their other movie, but
here's the problem that happens with different is when somebody goes out and makes a different movie or has success, which we've seen in the past, like when the independent movie, phase hit, back in the 80s. I mean, it really, maybe in the late 70s, 80s.
Miramax.
Miramax, right? I mean, everybody wanted to be the art person, right?
Yeah.
And then they started to make just bad movies because they said, let's be different. Well, if you're going against a formula that people like, you better nail it. I mean, you have and that's the problem with these is that
it's not even formula, Gary. You go to the movies because you want to feel something.
Right.
You don't go to the movies for anything else. Your comedy, you want to feel good and laugh. Drama, you want to feel good for the characters on the screen.
You're going to root for somebody. It sounds like there's nobody to root for.
Them. You want to feel something. And all I felt with this was, I'm glad I wasn't on the island.
But yeah. Well, I'm glad I wasn't in the theater or in my family room. The one thing I'd like to point out before we move on is that when you try to immerse comedy with horror, you've got to go over the top. Like, I'll give you Blood Relatives, which Noah Sagan. It's this. I think that it's this cool little independent that's on Shudder.com, which is a horror site. Noah's been in. He was in Glass Onion. He was the hippie guy that stayed at the house. Oh, yeah. And he's a friend of Rian Johnson's. And I've talked to him a little bit. He's in all of Rian Johnson's filming. He's also a filmmaker. This film, like Blood Relatives, it's about a vampire who finds out he has a daughter, and she wants to have a relationship with him. And it's very funny because it's like this guy finds out he has a daughter, she wants to be his daughter. And then obviously they kill people. But it's still funny because it's so over the top.
It's a fine line to walk. That's all. It's a very fine line to walk. It is,
but you have to make it like the violence in Blood Relatives. It's kind of ridiculous. You know what I mean? I mean, it's almost like Grosse Pointe Blank, which is one of my favorite movies. And that's a dark comedy. Even the violence in that, it's ridiculous. I mean, to the point where you go, okay, it's really not real. I mean, the violence is just kind of ridiculous. Where you're like, okay, it's just part of the script. It's almost cartoonish. That's the only way you can do horror and comedy.
Look, you can have a horror movie and have a couple of laughs in it, but man, I didn't laugh.
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't laugh.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next one. So Drew says no go on that one. Banshees of Inisherin, which is doing very well. Award season, Colin Farrell, I think he won the Golden Globe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he and Gleeson were both nominated for SAG Awards. I'm a huge Brendan Gleeson fan. I loved In Bruges. Between Farrell and Gleeson were in it. Martin McDonagh.
I liked In Bruges a lot.
I loved In Bruges. But this is a Martin McDonagh film about two Irishmen living on an island off the coast of Ireland.
Right
And
after the Civil War in Ireland. So it's
Right.
not present day.
No, it's like in the 20s. So, Brendan Gleeson says to Colin Farrell, Combs says to Patrick, I don't want to hang out with you anymore because you're boring. And
You're
that's
boring. I don't like you anymore. You're boring.
You're boring. And because he wants to he plays the violin, he wants to write this great score. I found the whole thing extremely entertaining. I thought Carrie Condon, as Colin Farrell's sister, was phenomenal. She won a SAG award. I thought Barry Keoghan, who plays Dominic,
best part of the thing. Him and Colin Farrell were phenomenal.
Tremendous. I mean, he plays a young fellow, a young person in town who has some challenges, and he's brilliant. I mean, the guy he's brilliant, and I love the acting.
He won a BAFTA, I think.
What's that?
He won a BAFTA.
He won a BAFTA. I mean, he's brilliant. But one of the things about this movie is that it has a Martin McDonagh ending, which is always going to be a little quirky. It's always going to get a little weird. Like in Bruges gets a little weird.
You want to feel something, Gare. And at the end of this, I felt like, come on, what the hell? That's what I felt.
What didn't you like about it? Because what happens throughout the movie is that Colin Farrell tries to repair his friendship with Brendan Gleeson through the whole movie.
Warning for people who've not seen it. There's going to be spoilers here. First of all, Martin McDonagh writes great characters. And that's why he can get Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. He just writes great characters. I'm sure it's why you like, because you got actors who want to play these people.
Oh, yeah. 3 billboards.
This is a decent premise. Okay, we're on an island. They're lifelong friends. All of a sudden, this guy doesn't want to talk to him anymore. You expect more, but it's all just the same. He's boring. And, when he starts cutting fingers off and a donkey dies because he choked on a finger, I'm sorry, it's not comedy. We're not supposed to laugh at that because Colin Farrell's bereft when this happens. I'm sorry. It's just, please, another island movie, by the way. 2 island movies. They should put them on shore. Maybe they'll get better. I'm telling you.
I mean, the sick person in me, after he cut off the first finger, I was like, but then when he cut off the other ones, I did kind of chuckle a little bit. I did not chuckle at the donkey or the pony dying.
No.
And
donkey. It was a miniature donkey.
It was a miniature donkey. I think because Gleeson called him a pony, he says he's a donkey.
Colin Farrell was sleeping with the damn donkey.
Yeah,
and I don't mean sexually, but
I thought I know. But I thought Carrie Condon. But I found it didn't. What got a little weird is then Farrell lights Brendan Gleeson's house on fire.
Yeah, at the end.
At the end, that's where I'm like, okay, Martin, what are we doing here? We just went from 2 guys that had a disagreement. A lot of great characters in the pub. The pub.
Is it asking too much to have a resolution? Is it asking too much? Imagine how great this would be if there was some sort of rapprochement. If they got back together and they said, all right, I'll study a little more. I'll try to be more interesting. Great. I'll try to listen to you let's start out with a couple of beers. Anything. Instead, it's like he burns his house down. Glad the dog wasn't in it. Blah, blah, blah. And no, I'm sorry you lost me. Gone.
Or one of them leaves the island, right? Maybe Colin Farrell instead of the sister, or leaves with the sister,
right?
Something like that. Like
somebody should leave the island.
Somebody leaves the island, and then with this, I'll come back and I'll visit you. But there's just some funny lines in there where.
But there's funny lines, no question.
Funny lines where Brendan Gleeson is saying, to Patrick, he says, you came to my house. I'm not even going to try to do an accent. But you came by my house the other day. We had a beer for 2 hours. We sat out in front of my house and you told me about all the things that were in your donkey shit for 2 hours. For 2 hours. I've got better things to do with my life. And Colin
does have better things to do with his life. So then explain to me why he's willing to cut his freaking fingers off when he wants to play the violin.
Oh, that part's dumb. Because he says, if you
sorry, Martin. Right. Sorry.
That's Martin McDonagh where he goes off. He did it in 3 billboards too, right? At the end, he did it with 3 billboards.
3 billboards, which I didn't like.
Well, I liked it up until they light the place on fire. I mean, she, and then Sam Rockwell and Frances McDormand all of a sudden become friends at the end. That didn't make sense to me.
She's pissed at him the whole movie.
And then all of a sudden they become colleagues. And she burns the police station down. So McDonough's endings never worked for me. It didn't in Bruges, but the two out of the three, they don't work for me. But the characters and the story up until that point, the characters in the pub, they just, like when they're sitting there with Colin Farrell and they say that Brendan Gleeson, who plays Colin, he goes, well, he's a deep thinker. He's a smart man. He's a deep thinker. And Farrell's like, well, what do you think of me? Well, you're a nice fella. Like, you're kind of dumb, but we like you anyway. What do you mean I'm a nice fella? I thought that used to be good enough. And back and forth. But I will give you that. It's a Martin McDonagh movie. At the end, you kind of go,
And look, movies are different things to different people. Okay. And you see that, remember the old days, and you went to the West Newton Theater and you saw the movies that didn't make it to the Cineplex and stuff. And movies mean different things to people. They don't have to be happy. You don't have to have happy endings. They, all that stuff. But, they got to make some sense.
Well, the problem is, Drew, I think, and kind of what I wasn't making my point very clearly before, is that you just mentioned it. There has to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. And at the beginning, there's always a question, and at the end, there's a resolution. And what people perceive as different, and this is why the movie Up There with Clooney, right,
Up in the Air,
Up in the Air with Clooney, when he's at the board in the airport, and he's figuring out where he's going to go, and he drops his bag, and you're supposed to come to your own decision on did he quit or is he going on to the next job, and that drives me crazy because it is the director and the writer's decision to determine the ending. It's not up to me. It's not up to you. We can agree or disagree how it was constructed, but don't leave the ending up to the audience. That's a cop-out, which is what happens in these movies. I mean, that's what happens in a McDonagh movie.
Lost in Translation, another example, but I liked Lost in Translation. But anyway, movies don't have to be commercial. No. But they got to make some money. That's the whole point. They're not cheap. You got to make some money because you got to pay people back. You got to pay the staff. I mean, you got to pay the craftsmen. You got to pay everybody. You got to pay the crew. You got to pay the actors, the writer, the director. You got to have some commerce in there. And it can't all be, I had this dream and the guy didn't like the other guy. Even that's a good premise. They're on an island. He's sick of the guy. That's a good premise. Right. I thought, Jesus, I'm going to like this. It's a good premise. But he started cutting his fingers off, and I'm sorry.
Up in the Air was the Clooney movie. What were you talking about? What were you talking about with Lost in Translation?
That's another one. You had to decide the ending.
Oh, the ending. And something.
He whispers in her ear. We don't know what he says.
We don't know what he says. And I'm a hypocrite because that never really bothered me.
No, I wrote about it. I didn't like it at first. I went back and watched it again, and I liked it. So.
I love the movie. I love that movie.
Again, great acting.
Great acting, but I also think in Lost in Translation, I think that there is a bit of a resolution where he seems to be happy.
Yeah. Well, she made him happy.
She made him happy. He wasn't happy at the beginning. He's happy at the end.
Yeah.
But, I think that's why I can't wait to see Air, which is the story of Nike with Matt Damon and with Ben Affleck, because it has a beginning, a middle, and end. It's a story of how somebody got from point A to point B. And the movies that we're talking about don't really do that.
Well, these don't. I mean, there's an ending. There's actually an ending and a resolution in the menu, and it's somewhat satisfying because the one person you don't hate survives.
Right.
But it's everything that leads up to that that's like, please, you got to be kidding me.
Right.
And again, there's fingers involved. Again, there's an island and fingers. That's all I'm going to say.
Island and fingers. Love it.
Yeah.
All right, Drew, anything else, bud? That'll do it.
That's all I got. Usually I gush.
You're on fire today. On fire. Okay. By the way, something we have to do down the road. I have started to watch The Mayor of Kingstown on Paramount Plus with Jeremy.
I haven't watched a single episode.
You being an upstate New York guy, you should watch it.
Was it set in upstate New York?
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot.
Okay.
All right, for Drew Yanno, I'm Gary Tanguay. Screentime. Movies, streaming, and everything in between. We'll see.
I got all my fingers. Look at them.
Got all your fingers.